Hello, everyone. Welcome to Midlife and Beyond Reinvention. Today, I have with me Loukia Mastrodimos. See, I knew I was going to mess this up. Mastrodimos. Okay, I think I got it. Yeah. Speech therapy and we don't get along.
That's okay.
And welcome to Midlife and Beyond Reinvention, where we talk about how you can turn things around in midlife for the rest of your life. So, Loukia, tell me about your own midlife reinvention, how that came about, and how Midlife Involved came about.
Yeah. Well, first of all, Karen, I just want to say thank you for having me as your guest today. I love connecting with kindred spirits, women of a certain age in the middle, as I like to say, who do have the mindset that they dwell in possibility of what's next. So thank you for just having me in your guest seat today. So as Karen said, I'm Loukia Mastrodimos, and I'm the founder of Midlife and Bold Inc. And bold stands for brave, optimistic, limitless, and decisive. And I think what is my mission is to change the narrative around anti-aging and over the hill and the best years of your life are behind you. And I'm really on a mission to change that narrative, that you can and should go after whatever is in your heart's desire in the second half of your life before you end up at the end of your life and you look back and you have regret. So I coach women around this concept of living boldly through this framework I've developed. And really it came about for me I was probably mid to late 40s. I had really just gone down the rabbit hole of shoulds my whole life, which I think many of us understand what that is all about, and got to a place where I was 60 pounds overweight and dealing with chronic stress. And I was very angry, and I worked a lot, and I was in an unhealthy relationship. And I just sat there and thought, what is going on? And then my mom passed away rather suddenly and unexpectedly as well. And I just thought there has to be more than this. I can't wake up for the next 15 years, which I was a public school educator in suburban Chicago, Illinois. And that was about what I had left in the span of, let's get to that end, the career to collect the pension, right? And so I just knew something had to happen. So for me, it was a culmination of loss and health problems and those two things were my trigger points. I feel like everyone has some sort of trigger point, but essentially those were my turning points in life.
I totally agree with that. And the beautiful thing about it doesn't have to be a huge trigger for people. Mm-hmm. People have to realize that they can make that turnaround at any point in their life, but they have to value what they really are looking for, what they really want from life, and where they want to go from this point on. Tell me some of the bold things that you did as a result of making that decision to have that turnaround.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that to start with, you have to know yourself. I think it's hard to be brave, bold, if you don't value yourself, and you don't value yourself when you don't really know who you are. So I find what happens in midlife is our identities have taken on new shapes and forms. We're at a crossroads from carrying the identity of mom, meaning you don't have the active mom role anymore, where you're not shuttling kids to and from, and it's not consuming your days, with scheduling all the different things. Or I work with many women who are divorced all of a sudden in midlife or widowed. And so essentially that is the starting point, really, is starting, what is it that I want? And I don't know. Sometimes I don't have that clarity because I don't even know who I am anymore. So once I started working with a coach, because I think good coaches, as you know, get coached along with therapy. I did some grief therapy after my mother passed away. It started to dawn on me that, in terms of career, I had this identity as a teacher, So being someone who was an entrepreneur in business was not my identity. And therefore, I didn't believe it was possible. So it's not necessarily who we think we are, it's who we think we're not that often keeps us stuck. So it started for me with, actually yesterday just came up on my Facebook memories, me holding my certificate of completion for my yoga certification. So it was 6 years ago. So that was sort of the big, bold thing I did at 45, I guess I was. Probably the oldest one next to one other woman in the class, trying to do this yoga teacher training, which was physically and mentally exhausting and demanding when you're working already 60, 70 hours a week. So, that was some of the things I did. And then I taught, full time for 3 years. I taught on stages at international conferences. I taught in boardrooms. I taught in parks. I taught in gyms. I taught in studios. And, this is all from someone who does not define herself or identify as someone who's athletic. So that was kind of my first big, foray into trying something different and new. Quitting her 6-figure career to teach yoga seemed like maybe I was having a midlife crisis to some people, but for me, it was the beginning of unraveling my identity that I had been really attached to for so long. So that was one of them. And then I went into coaching and started my own business. And then, I've moved across the country, I've moved back. So those are just some of the things that I'm starting my wine certification in the spring to be sort of a connoisseur of wine. So those are some of the things I'm just holding space for possibility, Karen.
So you got to get others permission to drink a lot of wine now.
Yeah, I already have it, but now I'll be able to pick better wine, I guess.
I think you're hitting.
Today is actually National Drink Wine Day, Karen. Did you know that?
Really?
It is.
Right. It's Friday. And the beautiful thing about culture is we can start our day and end our day anytime we want.
That's right. That's right.
Beautiful thing. But I think you hit on a couple of things. I mean, you went into a few different things. And a lot of times we have that mindset that, okay, so I paid for my degree in this, I'm going to work that so many years to get to the pension, and then I'm going to finally live.
Yeah.
We need to turn that around and understand that our journey is made up of all these different beautiful facets of life.
Yeah.
The midlife and beyond part of it has a lot of freedom attached to it. Number one, because at that point in life, we start to solidly really know what we don't want anymore.
Right. That's usually a good starting point.
We find the courage to start saying, I'm going to claim my life. And I think that's a beautiful thing, to be able to claim your life and really live it from like the depths of what your heart is telling you versus trying to juggle everything and trying to, make a living and caring for all these other people,
Yeah. I find that whisper gets louder, and then unfortunately, a lot of women don't listen to that whisper, right? And I am on a mission to let them know that it's okay to put themselves first, that they don't have to feel guilt, that they're not the only ones feeling this way. And so that feeling of not knowing what to do next is really, the part that I come in and help, because they know they want something different, but they really don't know what. Or like you said, a lot of people start with, they know I don't want this career anymore, but oh my God, I can't see myself doing anything else. I'm not skilled. I've been, in X field for 20 years. How on earth would I possibly switch into something new when it comes to career? Or I'm born and raised in this town. I don't know how I could possibly leave. What would my family think? Would I make friends? And I think there's a lot of fear-based decision making or inaction led by fear. So
let's talk about fear for a minute. I find that fear is probably one of the number one biggest blockers. The fear of the unknown. Let's put that down for a minute. Because when we think about the labels that we put on ourselves through our lives, we label ourselves like I'm a teacher, I'm not a business person. We immediately box ourselves. The beauty of midlife is that you can actually, if we stripped away all of those labels that we've had over the years and actually focus on the skills that we have, all of a sudden we start going forward with a whole new outlook. Because all of a sudden we realize, like, your teaching skills, you can teach yoga. Maybe you don't have the skill of yoga, but you have the skill of teaching and being comfortable with people. And when we recognize that we can apply those skills, those gifts that we have within us to the next phases of life, it starts opening up for us.
Yeah.
We don't stay in that box anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
That's the goal.
Yeah. So what bold thing do you have on your life list?
Well, that's a good question. I have a few. I mentioned the wine certification. So eventually what I'd like to do is get my business to a point where I have very few, but really high level, in-depth clients, maybe and other coaches or two working, the group setting. And I am off on a vineyard somewhere, pouring wine and serving wine and traveling. I'm 100% Greek, so I have ties to Greece, which I'll be traveling to this summer. And I also have visions of living there for a while and doing women over 50 retreats, sort of combining my yoga with my coaching. But unlike the retreats where it's all yoga focused, or you have to wear the right yoga pants and look a certain way, it's a gentler kind of, retreat in yoga. So bold retreats, if you will. So that sort of, some of the things I'd like to, acquire more property and have, and the ability to have multiple residences. So in terms of like the different spheres of wellness, I think there are a few different things that I'm thinking about, and I'm just constantly dreaming and putting it in my journal and not knowing exactly, sort of loose right now. But one of the things I do, Karen, that's different than before is I lean into how I want to feel versus what it looks like to others or the shoulds or the accomplishments. So I moved west 3 years ago. Well, I guess it would be 4 years ago, 2018. And then I moved back to the Midwest last fall. And I had moved to Arizona, and then I had moved to California. And I moved to California right before the pandemic. So it was a really lonely 2 years and not a great time to be new in a city. And so between that and some family things going on, it was, I made the decision to move back here. And I think that's the beauty, is that also I'm allowed to change my mind. I'm allowed to change my mind because I know that this is just a piece of the puzzle. And the next winter, my goal is to winter, west again on a vineyard near a beach. And so I think that giving yourself permission to lean into how it feels and that it's not permanent. If I decide I want to go back and live in go back to live in California full time 3 years from now, great. So I think we lock ourselves into, like, we make these big sweeping decisions and this is what we have to do. Like my yoga, I haven't taught yoga in 2.5 years. I'll probably get back to it someday, but again, prior to the pandemic, right? I moved to California and then I was going to audition for a studio, and then, March 2020 came. So it just so happened that that's not what I'm doing, but it doesn't mean I'll never get back to it again. So, in terms of bold and being brave, as I always tell my clients, that's on a continuum. There's like little B and big B, right? There's like jumping out of airplanes and names and neon lights. And then for some women, the brave could just be going on a date for the first time after they've been married for 30 years. And they're all of a sudden faced with trying to date again, right? Like everyone's brave and bold looks super different. At one point I thought about writing a memoir. Now I'm not sure. So I kind of lean into how does it feel? And then I go from there. Yeah.
I think that you raised a really good point. The point of leaning in, I talk about that. I have this book called, Unwrapping Your Passion. And I talk about the concept of leaning in that book, because a lot of times, especially for us as women, we tend to have been taught to stuff down the feelings.
1000%.
Yeah. Step up, be more like our male counterpart. So we lose parts of ourselves by the messages that we get from society.
Yeah.
So that concept of leaning in is a beautiful one because it allows us to be. It allows us to listen, like you said, to that little whisper in our heart that says, slow down if you want to. Go curl up on the couch and read that good book or whatever.
That's right.
Without the guilt, without the, oh, I should. And that's the beauty of the leaning in, because it gets rid of the I should. And it looks into the heart and it says, I want.
Yeah. Yeah. for sure. I think feelings are something we're taught to discount, to not lead with, to not make decisions by. It's too emotional. And I would say that that's exactly what we need to do, is to find ourselves. We need to tune in to what we're feeling. And oftentimes we know what we want, but we don't allow ourselves to go there, right? Like for a long time, I left education in 2016, and I found a note in the couch cushion when I moved in 2018. That was dated 2012. So it like must've been at a meeting. I was jotting down notes that said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I can't do this for another 15 years. So imagine from 2012 to 2016. So that was 4 years. And then another 2 years to move. Like, I just think that there's so much fear and unknown. And that's why people like you out there and myself and other women, people our age, women our age, need these role models. And I don't mean that I do everything perfect, but just of women aspiring to have a different life and doing it. So, my business coach always said, you can't model what you don't see. And so I stole that from her, but it's true. I think if you suffer in silence with this unhappy, unfulfilling life, and everyone around you seems pretty happy, you do feel like you're the only one. But when you talk to more and more women, you realize they're secretly suffering and not happy either. And they just don't know what to do because they don't see people writing books and leaving jobs and right. And so they're like, oh, well, that's possible, right? It's that living in that space for possibility.
Yep, you're so right. That kind of leads me to the next question, which is, let's talk about passion. Obviously, women in midlife who are bold are tapping into passion. So when you think of that word passion, what does it mean to you and how do you define it?
Yeah, it's a great question. For me, passion is a fire that I can't put out no matter how hard I try. Like no matter how hard I tried not to think about leaving my job, the passion to go into personal growth and development work and help other women was so strong. The fire just kept getting stronger and stronger. And every time I had to take a step back, because my road to entrepreneurship has been a roller coaster to say the least. I had a business that didn't go well. I ended it, started a new one. The passion for what I wanted to do with my life, that fire, it never dulled to an ember. It was always a flame, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger. And every time I had a setback and I had to go back to work full time and give up my business full time and then do that on the side, that flame, that passion just got stronger, because every time I had to take a step back, what I saw as a step back at the time, it just reminded me that I don't want this. And so the passion just kept growing. So for me, it's an internal fire. It's not a competitive thing. I could care less. I think there's room for everybody to win. I'm not competitive in the least sense of any kind, but I think that I literally visualize this flame growing and growing and growing and growing. And I feel like that's how I was with it when I was a teacher, right? And then I knew it was time to leave when that did dull to an ember, right? Like nobody wants to have their kids in classes and schools run by people who aren't passionate, right? So I knew it was time to go because I didn't feel that anymore. All I felt was frustration and anger, and the passion had left me for that type of teaching. So hope that answers your question.
That was a great answer for that passion.
Okay.
I love it. And so it leads us to the last question. What advice do you have for somebody who comes to you and says, man, I'm too old, I can't, I don't have the money, I'm just too far along in life to do what I really want to do. What would you tell that person?
Yeah, a couple of things. Number one, if you have breath in your body, you're not too old. So you're still alive, you're still on the other side you're on this earthly existence, you're living this earthly existence. So that I will never use that as an excuse. But if you don't have the money, number one, there's lots of ways to self-develop and move forward by self-coaching, right? Self-coaching on different webinars and blogs that you can read and podcasts and books. But I would argue that if it's important to you, you should find the resources and invest in yourself, because it not only tells your subconscious that you're worth it, it tells you yourself and shows yourself the value that you really see in yourself. So when I kept saying I didn't have money to invest in myself, I certainly had money to spend on a lot of other silly things. And so whether that's investing money or time or resources or your energy, if you don't invest in yourself, the time's going to pass anyway. So you're going to end up in the same place, or maybe even in a worse place 5 years from now, if you don't attend to your soul's needs. So it's never too late, you know, like I said, as long as you have a breath in your body and a beating heart, it's not too late. And just keep taking the next right step. Take the next right step over and over. It doesn't have to be a big giant step, just the next right step. Maybe it's, you know, grabbing that book that you always wanted to read and highlighting it and making notes, or watching one of these interviews that Karen does, or that kind of thing, and just continue to move forward. And forward motion is forward motion. So
that's beautifully said. Yeah, as long as we're still living and breathing, we have that ability to make the change. We have that ability to reinvent.
Yes. I love it, Karen.
Thank you so much for this. I really enjoyed our time
welcome.
together.
Yeah, me